Good day to everyone. Thank you very much for coming to this Fireside Chats, and we are here to discuss the topic local businesses tapping local startups. So we're very privileged to have two speakers today. We have um, Guaya Melgar and we have Sir Francis Gentoral. So Guaya is the co-founder and director of Vesl Trade Finance, and she has over 5 years of involvement in this fintech startup. And as a co-founder and director, she has driven partnerships with insurers, intermediaries, lenders, data providers, and other collaborators to expand their revenue channels and add value to the platform users. Hi, Guaya.
Hello.
And we also have Sir Francis Gentoral, the Executive Director of the Iloilo Economic Development Incorporated Foundation. He has more than 2 decades of experience in economic governance, business climate enhancement, sector competitiveness, and has managed various economic, environmental, and governance projects across the Philippines. Hi, sir. So, we gathered you here as part of the Fyrside Chats, the community engagement component of FyrLab, the acceleration program for startups in Western Visayas, funded by the Department of Science and Technology Region 6 and run by Youth First Initiative Philippines. And thank you for accepting our invitation to speak here. And today we're going to discuss the relationships between local businesses and startups in Western Visayas. So we want to give our audience a little more context about how these relationships play out and what are the opportunities for these relationships to get better, and at the same time you know expose them to opportunities. So opportunities for, say, if you are an SME, what are the opportunities that you can explore if you want to work with startups, or if you're a startup, will you be able to have like a local business as a partner and all of that. No? So our conversation this afternoon will revolve around that. So first and foremost, in your experience and in your immersion in the local business community, how would you describe the interactions between local businesses, and we mean SMEs and startups?
Sure. Me?
Sige, sir.
Sige, okay. So speaking of relationships, so where you want to know the relationship of the startup and the business community, or the corporate type of enterprise. I think they are currently living in separate rooms, but they know each other. I mean, they usually they come out from their doors of their rooms and they meet at some points, but they usually stay in their own rooms. What I mean by that is, I think there's a lot of still effort though for of course the startup to learn more about business, the corporate part of enterprises, and of course the enterprises to learn more about the startup communities and what their products and innovations that they want to offer. No? So basically, I think that's where, for me, Iloilo is now at the moment. Parang, they're there, but that they live at certain parts of the city, but there's a need for a lot of opportunities to build their relationships. I don't know.
Yeah. Actually, I have the same answer as Sir Francis. He said separate rooms. I wrote in my cheat sheet separate worlds. Because it's like they're both there, but there's not a lot of linkages yet. Like it's starting maybe from some NGOs like Youth First. Maybe some incubators are starting to help like link both together. There are meetings ongoing with the local government, but it's like in the very early stages. I think for it to become like even better, more improved, we have to be the local government and the agencies have to be more directional with their approach in terms of developing the system and linking all these together. So, like in mature markets like Singapore, for example, there are clear incentives to for corporates who work with startups, for ecosystem enablers, for investors, so that all these parang all these players will grow, diba? So like even when even trying to connect local businesses with startups, you have to move both. So you have to educate the startups. You also have to educate local business. You have to educate the big players, so that they move towards each other and converge and eventually exchange ideas.
I was actually thinking about the same thing about the education part, because based on your answers or based on your respective descriptions, do wala sang meaningful relationship like for now. No, I mean meaningful meaning something that would actually result into like partnerships or type ecosystem where one like SMEs filling gaps in the startup ecosystem or startups filling gaps in the business. So how do you suggest, well, aside from what I mentioned earlier, what are the things that we can do to like make these interactions? You said earlier, Sergio, separate rooms, separate worlds.
Yeah.
How do we put meaning into these interactions? I mean, do we wait for it to do we continue things we are doing now and then wait for like these relationships to happen, or we put something in that would we put something in that would actually
bring them together.
Bring them together.
Yeah, I think this is important, no, that there are opportunities for them to come together, no, like mga forums, mga webinars, and even mga maraming opportunities, mga market encounters. But I think one of the things I see is that when you talk about startups, usually it connotes young, dynamic, innovative, fast-moving. And when you talk about yung mga businesses, they are actually structured.
Yeah, structured.
They are, let's accept it, slow-moving. Parang they really are, the risks that they are taking is really, we would say calculated, but actually they always look at it as a risk, because it's a new idea. And I think knowing who they are, and I think that it's very important to understand who they are, and the startup and the business. I mean, both of them should learn about each other. And use opportunities for them to interact. Kasi kung minsan, di ba in the past, we always bring them into forums, into meeting, but sometimes they are not there. The ones you want to be there are not actually there. Probably because maybe as part of the process of coming up with a program like that, we should actually learn who are we working with in terms of the startup and what kind of businesses we need to partner with them, para matchmaking. Para there's a pre-matchmaking process. Para when they finally interact, it will be more meaningful and productive. I mean, that's how I see it. So, of course, before that, they really have to prepare, both sides. The startup will have to prepare themselves. I mean, they are ready for a relationship. At the same time, this business group or businessmen who are really slow moving, probably the bureaucratic, should also be prepared that these are the kinds of startups that they will encounter. Para you can come up with some meeting grounds. And I think the challenge is to find that meeting points that will spark the relationship, diba? I think that's how I see the process to be, and it should be calculated, planned, calculated, and driven by results.
There has to be a driver, actually. Maybe I think that's one thing I'm sort of looking for, not just in Western Visayas, but
In
like in the
general.
Philippines in general. So we have the new law, diba, the like, Innovative Startup Act, right? So now there are three primary drivers of like the startup ecosystem, which is DICT, DOST, DTI. And then these agencies have to work with like local governments, right, to form some sort of regional hubs. And yun nga, they have to be more directional about the approach. That's from the government side. But also like startup enablers like you guys. But you have to, parang you have a lot of work in your hands actually. Parang trying to prepare both the startups but also the investors and like possible mentors and businessmen who can work with these startups. So yun, a lot of education, a lot of dialogue and preparation. Yun. And then clear incentives to startups and investors.
Okay. How do we, what are the possible, so you mentioned about incentives and like a clear driver for these sectors to
come together, yeah.
So what do you think, top of mind, what do you think are these drivers? What do you think would encourage, if not like compel these sectors to interface?
Yeah, I think first things first. I think we know that while they're living separately, they really have a lot of common grounds, no? Or they need each other. I mean, startup needs the business, and the business needs a startup, right? I think so because businesses now wants to innovate, wants to improve their market, and I think there are a lot of opportunities for businesses to work with a startup because most of these are available in the startup community, the innovation, the new ideas. At the same time, the startup needs corporate funding, right? They need money, and I think that's where. And of course, when the startup needs money, of course the businessman would like to see some return on investments, diba? So they can actually have common grounds. No, it's a matter of giving the opportunity for them to sit or work together, and I think that's where what do you think are some of the ways and means, no, to bring them into one table? No, I think one of the things that we have to do is actually to support, no, the law. I think the law provides a lot. If you read the sections of the law, there's a lot of opportunities, no, for first things first, government agencies to work together. And I think that is actually one of the important enabling condition that the government should provide, right? I'm pretty sure they have their own programs, they have their own budgets, they have their own people. But I think the kind of perspective that these government agencies also should be innovative. Parang not innovative, it's client driven. If their clients are startup, they should learn more about how startups work and design their programs to address it, which is actually a very important enabling tool or condition if we want the startups to grow. So that's the part of the government. The part of the private sector, I think they like NGOs and civil society organizations, or even academia, should work together to ensure they have the opportunity to work with the business sector through the associations. So whatever that form takes. Okay. Kasi, for example, I was reading a study na financial daw is not the number one reason why startup wants to work with the business communities. A McKinsey study, the number one though is the market, because they see the market for it and the money or the financial goes to it. It's a study by McKinsey, which is interesting, no? I mean, the market is big, and the business should have a way of making sure that they either expand their market, and I think the startup communities through the innovation and technologies that they provide will be an opportunity for businesses to also expand their market.
And with that insight, is that a sign that startups are actually seeing market opportunities that traditional businesses don't normally see?
Yeah, because if you define startups, it's about change, no? Innovation. So if you see a problem, you want to have a solution.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how startup, I think, is defined. No? Not the, you have already a product and you want to expand your market. Yung mga ganong style. Enterprise na yan, no?
From the side of startups, what do you think? I think Guaya could best answer this one. What do you think would be a driver for startups to, like, by themselves seek opportunities to work with traditional businesses?
What would drive you to work with traditional businesses? Maybe I think I agree with what Sir Francis said. It's not just about getting funding from corporates. Actually, because the number one thing you have to get from, like, as a startup, is your client, right? You have to start building your client base, build your user base, and that's what will get you enough traction to eventually, be investable, right? So, when we look for partners, we can look for those who will add value in terms of, increasing your reach, for example. Like for us, like my experience with Vesl, because we were a platform to help businesses secure risk against non-payment of buyers. So, like a partner or a corporate partner that can help us, add value to this, or add value to the customers would be lending partners. So that's a route we took. Instead of just focusing on insurance, we triangulated and then added lending partners on the platform. So that's one thing you have to consider as a startup. You have to study which businesses would add the most value to your firm and your clients.
So I think that's related to my next question. So if startups and local businesses must work together, how would they know that they are fit for a certain kind of collaboration or partnership and kind of working relationship for that matter? What should they look out for
Startups.
from each other, startups and traditional businesses?
For me, the experience, maybe they really have to find, what do you call this? A simple opportunity. Like, you come across, like, I want to give an example. Digitization now is really popular, and the most effective way to deliver that to the business is the startup community. That's a kind of a quick win or a kind of a signature activity that will spring many other opportunities for startup. Parang sometimes for a startup to really pitch, sometimes you should not be driven by the product alone. You should know who are you pitching for and their needs, and find a way to make sure that there's a fit, as you call it immediately. You find that niche in the business. I think that's how, for me, from a startup's perspective, parang don't be too attached to your product. You really have to be attached to the solution, to the problem, right? And sometimes you tinker with your product so that you can, it can be, again, it's the same thing should be driven by market rather than financing. And if that works, if that value proposition works, then funds will come, that's how, but we really have to change the perspective of the startups, Parang we get too much involved sa business planning, product development. But you were taught about product market fit, very important tool actually, And understandably, the market changes So therefore, there must be some little adjustments for the product to fit in.
Yes.
Hindi pwedeng static na market, di ba? If you look at it. So therefore, the product should be in such a way that it is, responsive to the needs of the market. I mean, that's very conceptual. But when you actually do it on a day-to-day basis for a startup, it really demands a lot of analysis, tools and so on. Yeah, that's actually my thought about it.
Yeah, definitely the same thing. Like, you have to understand what the market needs, what your partners need, for sure. Like, what are the risks that they see? What are their challenges that you can solve as a startup? And also, like, maybe for the business side naman, you can try to see like which of these startup solutions can solve your problem faster, that you don't have to develop it in-house, diba? It will cost you less to just partner with a startup. So that's the sort of mindset both have to like develop.
Exactly. I think I really like that idea. And the role of the NGOs and the academy is the bridge,
help them
is the
see that.
bridge thing, no? That will make sure that the business understand that there are available solutions.
Instead of developing everything in-house.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are, for example, I'm a business owner that has a technical challenge but I don't know that a startup can solve that. So, but I know that there are startups existing and that there's this ecosystem existing. How do I get in touch with that ecosystem? Where do I go? Who do I call? Or sino akong malapitan?
Yeah. At the moment, we are still building that system or mechanism, which is actually we're in the right direction.
Yeah.
But it's quite slow.
Actually, there could be different ways. Well, one is of course approaching the current enablers, right, which are basically DTI, DOST, DICT. There's also a platform. It was newly launched last year. It's called Project Match. It was developed by Startup Village, and they received a grant basically from the USAID. And the goal of that platform is to match MSMEs with startups, also with funders and mentors. So that's one route, because there's a lot of startups on that platform. But maybe another route, if you're big enough, that other corporates in more developed ecosystems already do, is that they launch their own open innovation competitions. You can also do it as enablers, right? There are some even accelerators abroad that instead of focusing on startup acceleration, they focused on corporate innovation programs to help bridge directly the corporates with startups. So that's another route. If you wanna, not rely on current programs that are existing as a corporate, as a firm, you can also do that, right? To invite young inventors or entrepreneurs, to help think of these new ideas for you. So,
because sometimes there are based on everything that you said, there could be several groups that could serve as catalysts for these interactions and these relationships.
Yes.
But, do you think we need but the risk of that is there could be multiple approaches to how things would go or how things would play out. So, is that all right to have that? Is that productive, or will that be productive compared to having just one, say, authority on how to build this ecosystem and make, build these bridges and connect these sectors that should be connected?
When you say authority, meaning there's one organization, agency, that orchestrates the whole.
Would that be better than like multiple bodies or multiple sectors doing different approaches? Actually, is to essentially achieve one goal.
Yeah, but
For me, actually, there is no, it's not like this or that. But you can have a unified like approach under the government, but also still open like different approaches from the private sector or like from universities even. Because like precisely that's the goal, diba? Innovation is supposed to invite ideas. So you cannot be stringent in like this is the only route. Right? So maybe like the programs we have should be enough to like support these different enablers. Like what I said about the example of Singapore, the support they give is not just for the startups. Actually, ngayon, diba, like the programs in the government are like direct startup support. But they also support the investors, and they also support the ecosystem enablers like accelerators and incubators, right? So basically, they provide support to everyone, and then these players each come up with their own means to utilize the support of the government, right?
So what I'm learning from you is that the government should really take the lead.
Yes.
I mean, with the resources they have and the power in terms of the policy that they
Yeah.
they make, I think they are really in the strategic position to jumpstart any effort on acceleration,
Yes.
basically. So, for example, banking institutions, government bank institutions, diba? They have resources to be made available to the startups. I was talking to the private banking institutions and said, these are things that there's a lot of risks, no? Of course there is, no? Because it's an idea, you need to test it, but you need to do a lot of investments to develop the product. And this is where the role of the government should be, no? It's not just about making webinars or just talking about it, but really doing it on the ground.
Yeah.
So for me, for example, if we want to build the regional economy, which is anchored on agriculture and tourism and services and the logistics necessary, diba, to do that, I think one of the priority areas for startups, no, is to really help, value add to our current drivers of the economy. And I think there's so many. For example, farmers, the prices of commodities or vegetables, right? Sometimes the suppliers or the consumers don't know about it, right? So there must be, of course, there's a lot of technology already available for that. It's a matter of making sure that they are actually useful to a particular sector of the economy or of the community. So those kinds of simple examples. So I have to really tell you this though. I was telling a while ago about tourism website, Facebook, where every now and then they put on a long list of accredited industries.
Yeah.
And if you are a senior citizen, the very fine, prints, so there are a lot of technologies already to really have a real-time updating of those information, right? And you don't have to depend on Excel files and with colored headings and subheadings. So there's a lot of, those simple things which will actually help, promote the tourism industry. Those things are, even tour packages. Simple things like that. You don't even know, I don't know. It's really it's whom you know, but there's no available platform for really common platform for that. There's so many problems of the industry that need to be addressed, and I think solutions are already available in the startup community, except that they are not, popularized or,
It's not common knowledge here.
Again, given my example, they are actually working in the separate rooms. They know that they're working, but they don't meet at some points. There must be a common area for them to interact, right?
In terms of awareness, because you mentioned about some of these products already being developed, and there are actually teams working on these solutions. But then the public may not necessarily be aware that they exist, or these solutions are actually being made. On the part of startups, how should, like, what approach or what steps should they take to like address that challenge?
I saw in one of the pitches no, that we had, there's a lot available communication and social marketing startups already available, which they can be actually maximized. No?
Yeah.
There's a number of them already. So it's a matter of making sure that they partner with each other. I do believe also that sometimes startups may not be able to work well with some government because sometimes their systems and structures don't match. No? Like the timing of, sometimes you would say, your project is nice, but when you begin to talk about funding, and then you say, our budget is already approved, and you have to wait for 2023 and 2024. That kind of responses already tells us that there's no much communication between the players. And I think that's the idea of sana may overall association or convergence or whatever, that who constantly meet and exchange notes and so on and so forth. Those are some of the simple ideas, but maybe the challenge is how to make it work.
In your startup at Vesl, what were the initiatives that you did to allow your target customers to know more about your product and to actually use them?
Okay, so we had to go through several routes. Of course, as a startup, you really have to hustle, basically, do everything to reach the market, right? So we did direct market outreach, so talking to customers directly. We did that in Singapore, actually. So we had a sales team who helped us, try to sell the product directly. Also, we work with a lot of partners. So that was part of my job. So we work with lending partners because indirectly, they actually need the product because it's risk mitigation. So lower risk for the clients also means lower risk for them as lenders. So that's one route. And we also work with insurance intermediaries, so brokers, agents. So basically, we had to find different routes. Parang find all the routes possible that you have and then work with those. Right? So that's really your job as a startup. There's no other way around it. You can't just sit there, announce that you have a product, and then expect people to come to you. You really have to find each platform available. Pwedeng online, offline, which is what we did, right? So,
I find it quite amusing that you're providing answers that is already answering my next question. So, in relation to that, so it's when we talk about startups working with SMEs, so that's essentially B2B interaction or business to business interaction, right? So, what would you recommend, whether from the perspective of startups or from the perspective of someone from the business community? What approach would you recommend for startups to go after SMEs if that's their target market?
Actually, it really depends on your model. Sometimes you can go via platforms that have reach na with SMEs. For example, some insurance startups I know just offer their products directly via, say, GCash, or you go to the big platforms and then that's how you offer your product. Or you can use the government route. So if you're an export, if your startup serves exporters, for example, like us in Vesl. So we reach out to DTI EMB, so we can help reach exporters. So it really depends. There's no one single approach. Parang if you're the startup founder, you have to list all the possibilities and then hustle in all of those. Right. I mean, I'm sure you know that also. You can't. Parang you have to just explore everything.
Exhaust efforts.
Yes.
So
Championing also. You need to also
self-championing.
self-championing, and of course we have to build champions in the different sectors, right?
Yes.
And let them be the ones working together, right?
Yeah.
I mean, practically, there must be someone who will navigate the whole process. It's a good thing now we have those structures and systems in place, but parang pinoproblema pa ng private sector ang gobyerno to do it. I mean, parang when in fact it should be the government who should be doing most of these things, no? Because they have the resources, they have the manpower, and they have the policy to support their efforts, right?
Yeah.
So, and it can have scale, right? I think the advocacy to FyrLab is to really fire these agencies to work together. I mean, some agencies may not like this statement, but I think we need to really be more efficient and effective in solving problems in the Philippines, and startup development is one of them. Actually, I mean, I really believe in it. Yeah, because the problems now are not common. No? They are different in certain situations and in different contexts. Hindi pwedeng parang isang problem for the whole country. So there's really a lot of opportunities for innovations to be needed especially in areas where it's needed most, in our rural areas and those in the communities at risk. There's so much to work with, and I'm pretty sure startup development or even accelerating it is actually also a way of improving our social service delivery. I mean, hindi ka mahirapan mag-dole out if people are working towards building their capacity for addressing their own problem to the startup.
Maybe I just want to add one thing, since Sir Francis, we have a lot of suggestions that are for the government. So might as well add. One major thing that, because we did like a recent startup study in one project that I work for. And one common thing that helps the ecosystem grow fast is for the government to focus on ease of doing business. Because when it's easy to start a company, diba? It's easy for a startup to just, to come in, right? It's easy for investors to come in. But it doesn't have to stop at just coming in. You should make it easy for them to sustain the business and make it easy for them to exit as well. Because it's a given. Like, sometimes you just have to close shop because it's not a good idea, and then you restart, right? So the whole cycle has to be easy, right? Because if it's easy, parang the startups can just focus on the ideation, connecting, right? And it's not just for the startups, it's also for the enablers, for the investors, for the businesses, right? I think it's it's the seed or it's the platform where everything else, springs from.
What's what common challenge like in your respective perspectives? What's one common challenge that in building startups and in running startups, like connecting with government or like other traditional businesses? What's one challenge that really gets you? Like that's really when you think about it, you would say that this shouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm.
What's that? What's one hurdle that top of mind?
For me, that the lack of, it's really the low ease of doing business still here. the amount of steps you have to take to just open up a business. It takes so much time. I can compare because Vesl was accelerated in Singapore, right? So we had to set up shop there. It took us only a few days to open. And those few days are mostly because we had to collect our documents. But if everything is there, kaya, one day. Right. Here, with the online platform,
30 minutes.
It took us almost a year.
The sourcing of requirements also takes a lot of time. The sourcing
Yes. That, so like we have to deal with so many agencies, LGU.
Exactly. Jump from one room to the other.
And there's no like single portal where you see everything.
Yeah.
So that makes it difficult. Not just for startups, even just for regular MSMEs, right?
Yeah, I related to that story. I brought along some DTI and DILG officials in Singapore, and we went to this one enterprise something.
Enterprise Singapore.
Yeah, something. Diba, it's like a negotiation center in the Philippines. Yeah, diba? Then one of the DTI person said, "So where's the office of the negotiation center? How do you register?" And it's showing to us that's where it is done. And so we went to one community, and it's only one desk. It's that sophisticated space where there's a lot of people, a lot of those materials. It's only one desk, and it's a very obscure part of the community because most of the entrepreneurs are registering online. And submitting their documents online. Anyway, I think that's one of the areas where our ease of doing business needs to be improved. The online transactions.
Digitalizing.
Yeah, I know. And the startup community can actually help the local government do it. There's a number of that. I know in the region having that. I mean, it's really providing opportunities, for them to continuously interact. And I actually am imagining if I'm the mayor of a city, my first project is to build a space for them to interact. There's parang it's a hub. Like, private sector now are doing a lot of these hubs now. But the government has the resources. They can build a bigger one where everything is there now. I mean, I saw that model in North America. Even if they are a lot of big businesses, they really are concerned about their startup because they say that's the way to sustain the economy.
So, ease of doing business really is key to make these relationships like happen and flourish, right? So, but there's also culture. So would like to, before we go to the questions that we gathered from the community, we would like to touch a little bit on that.
Culture.
Because many of the partnerships, at least here locally, and in my experience also running a marketing agency, many partnerships and like business relationships are influenced by culture and personal, what do you call this? Differences of like executives, business owners, whether small or big businesses. So, in building in building partnerships and considering like from a relational perspective, human to human relationship, what advice would you give startups and MSMEs trying to
create the dating apps
strike
for
business relationships? In a relational level, how would they approach it? Like, is that something that they should really be stressing about, or is that something that that they could make that could be the center of their relationship?
I think constant communication is very important and data is really important, no, data sharing. I mean, speaking of culture, di ba, some of us don't want to share data, no, and they begin to tell you about all those laws that will prevent you from doing it. But in fact, there are a lot of information now that can make a difference, no, in terms of making decisions. Why I'm saying data? Because sometimes it's in culture, is our data sharing culture. Parang ano, no? Parang Pilipino, parang while we speak about bayanihan, parang basta may data, parang mahirapan ka mag-share. Of course, you have to trust those people you shared the data with should treat that properly, right? For purposes that is higher than just their individual motivations. So mga ganun, so it's more of the spirit of culture of helping each other, very important. So from the perspective of the business, I think the expression of the social responsibility is really important also, especially those medium and large, where they have a big market. So I think more and more of us should be more concerned about the other stakeholders, which is the community at risk. And I think if we include that as part of business strategy, then it can gain traction in terms of putting resources and capacity on that. No? For example, if I'm a big company here, I have a community service CSR, then I have to focus not just giving food during calamities, but also make it as a part of your strategy, no, not just because there are problems. And startup development is one area where the big business can express their corporate social responsibility. Yeah, I mean that's how I see now they can start, and it's they can have tax rebates or shields and that, right?
Let's go to some questions that we gathered from small businesses that we have partnered with and from startup founders also. So one question is, I am a coffee shop owner who intends to systematize my payments. Anong klase startup ang makabulig sa akon? Diin ako makadto kung sino ako palapitan. So even in this question, there's a
simple question.
There's a needed human interaction, right at the outset. So, ano klase startup makabulig sa ako? What kind of startup can help me? And where do I go? Who do I turn to?
Yeah, I think you know the answer, right? There are a number of applications, mga apps, subong, di ba? It's a matter of someone else linking them to where the product is available, right? Is located. So yun ang role sana ng hubs, mga negosyo center, where you provide services to those who need it. And I mean, policy-wise, we have actually. People-wise, we have. It's a matter of making sure that they are focused on the right. They're using their lens on the right focus. All right.
Sige. Next is, we're building systems that streamline government services. What's the best approach to get more agencies or LGUs to buy our product or hire our team?
Yeah.
It's for LGUs.
LGUs, yeah.
So, for startups, what's the best approach to get more agencies or LGUs to buy our product or hire our team?
I guess the first thing is you have to test it with one LGU. Who will be your champion for the rest, right? So, for example, you test your product with Iloilo City. If they like it, I'm sure they will recommend it to the others, right? The next thing would be to approach the agency that coordinates with all these LGUs. So who would that be?
DILG, DICT.
Right? Or DICT. Yeah, so then you approach them. But you already have a sort of test case, right? Which is your pilot LGU. So that could be your approach.
The other one I suggest is to really know the procurement law.
Yeah, that's
I think the startup should know
Yeah.
the nitty-gritty of the procurement law because you have to really follow those policies. No? You just cannot just complain because I'm just a startup, I cannot do that.
Yes.
You really have to work hard to comply
Yeah.
with the requirements, right?
Yes.
No, I think that's one of the things.
And also maybe speaking of being like your customer being your champion, I think just to add an insight into that, highlighting your customer experience, maybe in whatever touch point you have for
Yeah.
communicating the value of your product or service. That would be one tactic for you
Exactly.
to get more clients to hire you. Okay. Last, to ka-generic lang. So, may business idea ako kung gusto ko mga yung bulig to develop it. Kay sino ako pwede kapalapit?
TBIs.
Sa TBS.
Yeah, diba? They're offering courses on that, no? Business incubation. Yeah. But if you have money, you can ask someone to do it for you. But there are a lot of government programs, no? DTI, DICT, the OST are available to do that. Even DA actually is helping their own farmer groups now on preparing proposals. But of course, there should be added clearer value proposition on na dapat innovative, dapat it has a market, dapat the model is really attractive, and so on and so forth.
That's right. Okay. So, thank you, and I guess parting words, final words before we end the chat. We are having this discussion with a context, in the context of things that we ourselves already understand, but for the benefit of those who are still, trying to make sense of this. Why is having a strong relationship among startups and traditional businesses important, and what does this do to the bigger community?
Very big question to
Thank you
answer.
for the question.
Thank you for the question. Can you repeat it? Yeah, I'm joking. I think if you look at the first question you throw to us, kailangan there must be, startup needs the business sector basically, and the business sector needs the startup communities. They have specific benefits that they can derive from each other, right? And they have resources and capacity to share with each other. So I thought that if there are opportunities for them to come together and work this out together, I think things will, the value of having a startup and the need for accelerating it is really a very good value proposition for economic development in this part of the country, especially now that we really have a young population. And I think the economy in the future will be managed by those who are involved in the startup communities now. So helping the startup grow and expand, accelerate is really one of the most sustainable and resilient economic strategy for our city, our region, and even our country. I'm pretty sure that's the reason why we have those startup laws that are available. And despite all the discussions on problems on partnering and partnerships, I still believe that that's the way to go, for startup development in this part of our country. So thank you.
Yeah, basically that's it. Startups and businesses add value to each other, right? It's just a matter of seeing what value we need, right? What value we can give, right? And looking for those businesses or those startups that can bring that value to us, right? So the goal naman of you guys have to be, making sure that there's a fruitful ecosystem, like more startups, more investors, and more velocity in terms of exchange, right? Faster velocity in terms of exchange. So volume and velocity.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Guaya and Sir Francis, for your
Thank you.
time tonight. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
And, very insightful conversation, and I believe the business sector and the startups would really find value in the insights that we have shared and the things that we have discussed. So thank you very much, and we hope to have you back in our next Fyrside Chats in the future. And thank you also for tuning in, and catch you in the next Fyrside Chats. Thank you very much.